The person everyone else describes as just another ex becomes the one who haunts someone's thoughts for years, while the objectively perfect partner they dated for twice as long fades into pleasant memory within months. This isn't about love, compatibility, or even attraction. It's about something far more disturbing that Carl Jung discovered buried in the human psyche. The people someone can't get over aren't special because of who they are, but because of what they unconsciously represent about the observer's own hidden self. Most people believe they're mourning a lost relationship when they're actually grieving something they never possessed in the first place. Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the unconscious mind, revealed that the unforgettable person serves as a psychological mirror, reflecting back disowned parts of the observer's personality. What feels like irreplaceable love is often unconscious self-obsession disguised as romantic attachment. The solution doesn't involve forgetting or moving on. It requires integrating what that person represented about the observer's own unrealized potential. The shadow you're really missing. Jung understood that every individual carries a shadow, the collection of traits, qualities, and potentials they've disowned or never developed. As he wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The unforgettable person often embodies these shadow qualities, creating an unconscious fascination that feels like love. The confident person becomes obsessed with someone emotionally unavailable because unavailability represents the emotional independence they've never cultivated. The people pleaser fixates on someone selfish because that selfishness represents the healthy boundaries they've never established. The overly rational individual can't forget someone chaotic because that chaos represents the spontaneity they've systematically suppressed. This projection creates a psychological paradox. The observer simultaneously desires and resents the very qualities they find irresistible. They want to possess these traits through proximity to the other person rather than developing them independently. Jung noted that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The shadow projection explains why logic fails against this type of attachment. Friends offer reasonable arguments about incompatibility, red flags, and better options, but these rational appeals cannot compete with unconscious psychological needs. The observer isn't choosing to remain attached. They're being unconsciously compelled by their own disowned self-seeking integration. Notice which specific qualities about this person feel most magnetic and irreplaceable. These are likely your own undeveloped potentials demanding attention. The Anima, Animus trap. Jung identified another layer of unconscious projection through what he termed the Anima, the unconscious feminine aspect in men, and Animus, the unconscious masculine aspect in women. These internal images, formed through early experiences and cultural conditioning, create idealized templates that certain people seem to perfectly match. When someone encounters their anima or animus projection in another person, the resulting attraction feels faded, cosmic, and utterly consuming. According to Jung's research in Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, the anima is the archetype of life itself. This internal image carries tremendous psychological energy because it represents the observer's connection to their own deeper vitality, creativity, and emotional authenticity. When projected onto another person, that individual appears to hold the key to the observer's psychological completion. The anima typically embodies qualities like emotional depth, intuitive wisdom, creative inspiration, and nurturing acceptance. The animus often represents qualities like intellectual clarity, decisive action, protective strength, and ambitious drive. These projections explain why certain people seem to possess an almost supernatural ability to inspire, motivate, or emotionally activate the observer in ways others cannot. The trap occurs when someone mistakes this projection for actual compatibility or destiny. They believe this person uniquely provides what they need, when actually this person simply triggered recognition of what they need to develop within themselves. Jung observed that understanding projection requires recognizing when external attraction points toward internal development. The relationship becomes addictive because it temporarily satisfies the psychological hunger for these qualities without requiring the difficult work of actually cultivating them independently. Breaking free requires recognizing that the magnetic attraction points toward internal development rather than external acquisition. Start identifying whether your attraction centers around this person's emotional qualities, Anima, or action-oriented qualities, Animus. This reveals which aspect of yourself needs integration. What they actually represent. The psychological significance of the unforgettable person extends beyond shadow and anima/animus projections into what Jung called the individuation process, the psyche's natural drive toward wholeness and self-realization. This person often represents not just missing qualities, but an entirely different way of being that the observer's conscious personality has rejected or never considered possible. Jung understood that authentic development requires withdrawing these projections. As he wrote in his letters, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The unforgettable person frequently embodies this authentic self that the observer buried beneath social expectations, family programming, or survival strategies. This explains why the attachment often feels like homesickness for a place never visited. The observer isn't missing this specific individual. They're mourning their own unlived life, their own unexpressed potential, their own abandoned dreams that this person somehow embodies. The relationship becomes a vehicle for vicarious self-experience rather than genuine intimacy. The psychological intensity emerges because this person serves as a bridge between the observer's current identity and their potential identity. They represent transformation itself, which is why losing them feels like losing the possibility of becoming who they're meant to be. The attachment creates an illusion that wholeness comes through union with another rather than integration within oneself. This dynamic explains why attempts to replace this person inevitably fail. No one else can fill this role because the role isn't actually about external relationship. It's about internal transformation. The observer seeks in others what they refuse to seek within themselves. The obsession dissolves when the observer begins actively cultivating the qualities and lifestyle this person represented, making the external mirror unnecessary. The Individuation Solution. Jung's concept of individuation provides the only genuine solution to compulsive attachment. This process involves psychological development toward wholeness through conscious integration of unconscious contents. The work requires withdrawing projections and reclaiming the psychological energy being unconsciously invested in others. Individuation isn't about suppressing feelings or forcing detachment. It's about understanding what those feelings actually indicate about the observer's own developmental needs. The process begins with conscious recognition. This person triggered something that was already present but undeveloped within the observer's psyche. The magnetic qualities they possess aren't foreign elements but forgotten aspects of the observer's own potential. Practical individuation involves actively developing the qualities this person represented. If they embodied emotional authenticity, the observer must practice emotional honesty. If they represented creative freedom, the observer must pursue creative expression. If they symbolized confident independence, the observer must cultivate self-reliance. This work feels simultaneously liberating and terrifying because it requires abandoning familiar identity structures. The observer must risk becoming someone new rather than remaining someone incomplete who needs others for psychological wholeness. Jung noted that consciousness always involves confronting uncomfortable truths about oneself. The transformation occurs when the observer realizes they no longer need this person to access these qualities. They've developed them independently and can express them freely. What once seemed impossible to attain becomes naturally available through inner work rather than external dependency. Begin practicing the qualities this person embodied in small daily actions, rather than waiting for their return or approval. The cruelest irony of compulsive attachment is that it prevents the very thing it seeks. By remaining psychologically dependent on someone else for completion, the observer ensures they'll never actually experience the wholeness they crave. They become permanent beggars for experiences they could generate independently. Jung's work reveals the profound truth hidden within every obsessive attachment. It's not about them at all. It never was. The person who seemed irreplaceable was simply the first mirror clear enough to reflect back the observer's own disowned magnificence. The pain of losing them is actually the pain of recognizing how much of themselves they've been unconsciously abandoning. Jung understood that genuine freedom comes through accepting complete responsibility for one's own psychological development. The individual who completes this acceptance discovers something remarkable. They become unforgettable to themselves. The person they couldn't get over becomes irrelevant the moment they become impossible to abandon.